Hi guys, and today is my long-awaited, long-overdue review for another Batman comic, Batman White Knight. And White Knight is an 8-issue Elseworld story written and drawn by Sean Gordon Murphy, and it's a role switch of Batman and Joker, where here Batman is depicted as a villain, or not really a villain. He's a stubborn, dark fighter, and he's becoming more and more unhinged, which is leading to the further destruction of Gotham City and his allies and family. Meanwhile, a recently cured Joker is trying to expose him and the corruption he's enabled to thrive in the city. So this Joker is portrayed as having a Jekyll and Hyde personality, and so that there's one side of Joker who's the insane man who lives to get Batman's attention, and then there's the other Jack Napier, who is a genius politician who claims to love Gotham City, and he earnestly wants to save it from Batman and all the craziness that him being a vigilante and the bringing on all the other costume villains has brought on. And he is joined by a reformed Harleen Quinzel. And there's definitely a story to be told here, and I was especially interested when I first heard it about the Batman and Joker role switch, because I love role switches, and I love the idea of Joker having a split personality rather than being an incurable psychopath. And I think the final product is very well paced. It kept me interested for the entire run. Each issue takes you further into the story, and which I better tell you right now, this is going to be a full spoiler review. Whether it's Alfred dying in issue 3 or the Gotham City police turning and the Batman family, that is Batgirl and Nightwing, completely turning against Batman in issue 5, there's always something in each issue to keep you going and that you can take away from and make you remember the issue after you've read it. What also makes this an enjoyable read is the surprise twists that Murphy adds to the characters throughout the story. And one of the biggest and most memorable twists was the two Harleys reveal he did early on in the series, where the modern, more violent and sexualized Harley is cast as a fake, and the real Harley, which is a much more grounded character, is revealed to just have been in hiding. And this was a big deal for Harley Quinn fans, such as myself, who haven't been so fond of the way the character has been handled in media lately. But it also makes for some interesting characterization in the story. It's refreshing to get a version of Harley that isn't constantly screaming bad jokes at the audience. And she's far more toned down character here that kind of plays out of the Arlene Sorkin version, even though it's an alternate take. And the second Harley becomes a new villain in the story called Neo Joker, who wants to bring the Joker's chaos back into Gotham and make sure he isn't cured. And she's a really selfish and dangerous and cruel character, a very sassy character. And I wouldn't mind seeing her in other comics. I just really enjoyed reading her. I think the best part of the entire book, going back to the twists, however, was how it did its story of Robin. In this version, Jason Todd was the first Robin, and he was captured and tortured by the Joker in order to find out Batman's secret identity. And this leads to the best moment in the entire series, where Jason Todd is all beaten and crying, and where he's just completely torn down, and he claims, "I wish I'd never met Bruce Wayne." And it was the most emotional moment in the entire series, and even unexpected for me. And it was the best example here of how deconstructing Batman's methods and the more realistic effect it would have on the people he trains. It's the best deconstruction of Batman the story does. And another of the best things about this comic is the artwork. Murphy's style is really distinct, and he does a great job using visuals to sell his story. When he has a full-scale page that depicts something, like there's a cannon, an ice cannon depicted in like issue 5 or 6, I believe, and it just, the scale is amazing, and it just looks larger than life, and so it's wonderful to see. So a lot of people buy this story for the artwork alone. And he also has a great handle on his character designs. I think that Joker was really good, and Harley was really good, and Neo Joker was the best. All great designs. But this book is not without its many flaws, and I'm aware that this is a very critically acclaimed book. It's very hard for me to find any criticism, like any negative reviews of the story at all, but I do think that this has a lot of flaws in it, more than people let on after I read it again. And even the first time I was feeling that. And they kind of inhibit even the good parts of the story. For example, I mentioned I really like Neo Joker, but she's portrayed a little bit inconsistently, because in the beginning she's very selfish, and she doesn't really seem to care about the Joker actually. She just is attracted to the chaos he brings. But later, we get a more sympathetic backstory for her, which is fine and makes her more layered, but it also seems to want us to make her feel sympathy for who she is now. It then all of a sudden makes her out to be someone who really cared about Joker, who is portrayed differently in this story. I'll talk about that in a minute. And apparently the reason for this inconsistency is Murphy realized that some modern Harley Quinn fans were really upset by his portrayal, kind of bashing the modern version. So he tried to make his modern Harley a bit more sympathetic, but it made the writing inconsistent. And I'd say the classic version of Harley is a bit inconsistent as well. And big spoiler here, by the end of the story, it's revealed that she's the one who created the cure for Joker's insanity. And even though she knew it wouldn't last, and so she's essentially the whole one who set out to save Gotham from the whole Batman-Joker fight. But this version of Harley was never set up to be that ingenious, and it's not something that the classic version would be. She wasn't an outright genius. And the idea that she could have orchestrated everything from Joker finding the pills to choosing to take them and every step afterwards, it's a bit much for me. I don't think she was developed to be a genius early enough in the story. I don't think that her plan really makes too much sense because I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. I don't think her plan makes that much sense in that she was never really given motivation, like she really loves Gotham and wants to save it. And it seems like it's a bit far-fetched that she would believe that, it's worth it if I can just make these pills to make the Jack Napier personality come out for just a little bit, especially because she seemed convinced like she could cure him earlier on, but this part of the story at the very end makes it seem like she knew everything that was going to happen. But I think where the characterization really goes down in the story, because those are just smaller things, it's with Batman and Joker, really. Because, of course, these are alternate takes on the characters, but even alternate takes need to make educated changes on the characters that will shed a new and interesting perspective on them. Here, Batman is more of a parody of himself than a different take. It's clear that Murphy is trying to channel the Kevin Conroy version of Batman from the animated series, but this Batman is really irrational and overly emotional, and he's completely oblivious to the actual problems of his city. Like, I don't get how Batman could fight in Gotham for decades only to never realize the corruption taking place with the police and the city government, since that's the exact thing he set out to destroy. And the comics want me to also believe in White Knight that he's also intelligent, after all, that he also has great detective skills, and that he is a bit similar to the animated series version, and I just can't believe that at the same time. I just think this Batman is more of a parody of himself, in that he's kind of a combination of the various jibes you might have with the Dark Knight trilogy, like, look, if Batman doesn't kill, why is he driving his Tumbler over rooftops, which is literally a point in the series. And it's just, again, it makes it more of a parody, like you might see in the Lego Batman movie, than a great alternate take on the character. And it kind of deflates the Jason Todd scene I talk about, because that could have been so much more powerful in a scene that wrote Batman, a series that wrote Batman a little smarter as a character. And Murphy's take on Joker, also, it has ideas, again, that I really like, but it's also really poor. In order to make it seem plausible that people would accept a reformed Joker as a leader in the story, he writes it so that apparently there was no evidence that this Joker actually killed anyone. I find that really hard to believe, because this Joker is seen firing off a machine gun and threatening people in the story. I mean, even if I can buy that, that Murphy's Joker really isn't about being a dangerous criminal, this Joker is really just, if you take that away, he really just seems to be about his obsession with Batman, just up to the point of romance. This is where some of the sappiness in the story comes out, like the part when there's a reference that Joker was outright crying because he thought he'd never be close to Batman. And again, this is where it just seems to parody the regular characters, because I know a lot of people like to poke at Joker's insane obsession of Batman in mainstream comics, like he's in love with him, but it doesn't mean going all in on that makes an interesting rendition of the character. It just makes him feel really, it almost makes him, stupefies the character a bit. Maybe that's not the right word, but it just made him really sappy and really simple. Another thing that people like to talk about this story when they criticize it or even praise it is the politics, because this was a story where Murphy really wanted to say his piece on his politics. And here's the thing about and they really defend him, saying that it's okay if he puts his politics in the story because he uses subtlety. But there is nothing subtle about the politics in this story. They're as blatant as they can get, with direct references to SJWs, who are kind of cast as the heroes in the story briefly in the background, and Gotham's issues are largely made to match today's, or the way they were in 2017, 2018, especially like talking about police violence against black people. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to have politics in a story, and a writer's views are always going to leak into art. Politics have been in Batman stories like The Dark Knight Returns, and it doesn't make it good or bad necessarily if you agree with them or not. Like Star Trek has some pro-socialist themes I disagree with, but I still love Star Trek. And so my problem aren't what Sean Murphy believes or whether I agree or disagree. My problem is the politics are so blatant that I didn't feel like I was reading Batman. I felt like I was just hearing the author state, well, these are my politics, and he just used Batman as a landscape to that. Not that he thought he would help enhance how we look at the characters. And the politics really took me out of it as a Batman story. And to go further into that feeling that I wasn't really felt like I wasn't really reading Batman a lot of times. Murphy himself has admitted that he hasn't really read too much of The Dark Knight. He's a really big fan of the animated series, and why you can see a lot of that tone and a lot of those references here. But for example, Sean Murphy thought that Jason Todd being the first Robin in the story, he thought that was the way it was in mainstream comics, and that's the only reason why it happens in his stories, because he was misinformed on that. And the two Harley situation that got so much acclaim from fans only happened because he was seeing what he thought was controversy between the Suicide Squad movie version and the original version of the character. Even though that's not so much the case, it's really between the classic version and the New 52 version. So Murphy's best moments in the series almost came by accident. So overall, I know I've said a lot of criticisms, but Batman White Knight is a really entertaining read. I'd suggest you try it out for yourself, and it has some great artwork and ideas, but it has some inconsistency and some sappiness and some political themes that I felt were a little bit forced on it, that weren't really as appropriate for a Batman story, I thought. And it has really a lack of understanding of the Batman mythos that could have made the ideas he was exploring with them a lot stronger if he just didn't go with, what various jokes people might make about Batman or Joker. I do think Sean Murphy is a very talented guy with a lot of potential as shown in this story, and I would just encourage him to continue researching these characters to become a better writer for them. He's got a new series coming out right now called Curse of the White Knight, and I'm looking at it and I'm checking it out, and again, he is a very compelling writer, and even though he has some flaws, I think he has a lot of potential for the future. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm going to have some more Batman reviews and some more Spider-Man reviews and some more movie news coming out soon. So be sure to subscribe and tune in next time.